everyone. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the What You Don't Hear podcast. This is a 15-minute Friday where myself and a returning guest sit down one more time. But this time we're talking about a specific topic or subject with the goal, the hope of maybe sending you into your weekend or your upcoming week with some positive, actionable, maybe thought-provoking advice or opinion. And you heard us chatting already, as long as I don't edit it out. Adam Lehman back on the show. My friend, thank you so much for doing this,
It's exciting to be here.
Thank you. You're ready for the timer.
You have a better mic than the last time I was here, so this is already great.
Yes, this is a better setup.
You came onto our podcast, which is piddly in technology setup compared to this one.
You know what? I'm going to accept that compliment.
That's great.
I will just accept it, even though I had an absolute blast.
It was a great time.
The Gem Club, which you can find wherever you're listening to this one or watching this one right now. So it's out there as well. So before we end up making another 2-hour episode, this is not what this is about. We were talking about the timer, so it is beginning right now. This episode, we were talking about the general, broad topic of just Entrepreneurship 101.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's so many different directions we can go with that, and we can label it so many different ways of just self-employment, creatives in general, freelancing, anything, because while each of them have their own avenues, they're all kind of very similar.
Yeah.
But this is a big one that I really wanted to bring to you and have you talk about, because one, I see you post stuff about this all the time and talk about this pretty often, but I also feel like you're going to have a ton of, no pun intended, gems to drop with this one.
Yeah.
So let's just start it there. When I say Entrepreneurship 101, what comes to your mind?
Define the terms before we start talking.
Right.
Yeah. So I love talking about this because I wasn't trained. I didn't go to business school, and I run a business, and I help other businesses operate their business. And in doing that, I started to learn that there's a lot of education that you think you get in business school, or if you didn't go to business school, you're like, if I went to business school, I would know X, Y, and Z. And I don't necessarily think that's true. I didn't go, so I can't speak to that. But in my experience, a lot of this stuff doesn't make any sense. Business, generically speaking, is pretty out of touch with reality. And I think that's the first thing. I'll talk about that a little bit, but I think the first thing a person has to understand is that it doesn't make sense. It's a different language. And so I think the idea of learning to operate a business or a startup or running your own freelance, whatever it may be, is you're starting to do some things that can feel unnatural. I think they are unnatural. I think we're not born with a sense of your time is valuable to some, or we're not born with a sense of $10,000 an hour tasks and $10 an hour tasks and sort of understanding how do we delegate those things. It's not a natural thing. We don't look around other living things and see them operating with that sort of mechanical interaction with the world. Mm-hmm. It's not natural, I think. So that's the first thing you have to understand. I think because I coach a lot of entrepreneurs, many of whom are not white dudes, I'll say that. They're in demographics that maybe are socialized to not be shared as much business information with certain groups of people, or, different groups are treated differently, or different folks come up through school and maybe there's just not often told you could run a business one day, you could do your own thing. We're living in an era of time right now where we're watching a whole bunch of people, we've never seen someone like Serena Williams, who runs an incredible venture capital firm. We've never seen Kim Kardashian before, who just started her own private equity firm. We've never seen rappers like Jay-Z put out whole albums that are just talking about business, right? So all of us understand entrepreneurship at a level that wasn't accessible to the general public. The internet has helped us do that. But we think, we're really different than those people. It's like celebrities. It's people who are very different than us. And then you have someone like me or someone like you who's like, I think I would like to charge some money and make something for people.
Yeah.
And the only difference, there's a lot of differences between us and those people I listed, but the difference is they or someone close to them started to understand and translate the language of, I want to create something, I want to make something, I want to build something into the language of business. You think about, if you even if you're freelancing, you're probably using something like, hopefully, if you're not, hit me up and we'll talk through these things. I hope you do this, but you're using something like QuickBooks or using something like Xero or Wave Accounting or something like that to run your finances or pay your taxes or understand what you're doing. But so when I say business is a secret language and it's disconnected from reality, is that a P&L is a really important part of your business, a profit and loss statement or an income statement. It's an important business thing. But when you look at those, like it's not reflective. It's reflective of some transactions, right? A business is a legal entity living inside of a legal system that was invented in the 1300s by a bunch of European white dudes that made sense for them at the time in the world they were living in. And it doesn't really, we're still operating under the same laws. So when you're running a business or you're building a business and you're like, should I be a LLC or a sole proprietorship or an S corp? Like, who cares? You do the exact same things for the exact same customers, for the exact same amount of money, but you have to understand this secret language of business to be able to succeed best. And most people miss that. They think, and I think this is one of the biggest lessons of my professional life as I sort of learn my own stuff and learn from other people, is that you can do a really good job. You can treat people really well. Everyone can like you. You can be well respected, and you can fail in the secret language of business, on the P&L, on the balance sheet, on the cash flow statement. And all three of those things are like, to me, are like the sort of like holy trinity of business documents that we pay attention to. And if you can learn to speak that language, then you can start to learn to do some other things. And you can be like, okay, I'm going to do the exact same thing I was doing before, but I'm going to be successful as an entrepreneur or as a freelancer or I'm going to understand, like, how does a business that's structured or legally designated the way that mine is, or how does it operate? It's not really my passion to talk about the legal designation and things like that, but I had some people sit down with me and sort of help me understand those things. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been trying so hard to build something. And there's people who try less hard, are less creative, less empathetic, do a worse job, and are more successful because they understand the mechanics and the language of it all. They understand legal contracts. They understand all of those things. And so I think for the 101, I like to go like, what is business? Like, what are we doing? And then understanding how do we operate within that particular system? Because that's a system we have. You can be mad at it, but that's what, it's like, I often explain it to people who are frustrated at the way the world's set up. It would be like the way things are is a tidal wave. And you can either surf it and learn how it moves and learn to move with it and hopefully make it a little bit better in the process and try to make things more equitable or whatever. Or you can just get crushed by it. And there's not really, that's what's going to happen. We live here, the wave's here, and you get to choose how to sort of act with it. And that's just what it is. And so I think 101 to me is we start at what is this thing? Because for most of the people I work with, it isn't people who are comfortable. If I was like, pull up your P&L, pull up your balance sheet, let's talk through those. It's not people who are comfortable doing that. Or if they're comfortable doing it from a vulnerability standpoint, they're not comfortable, they don't feel a lot of mastery in walking through each of those line items on there and talking through them. It's a big deal.
Right. So at those starting points, a lot of the time, like, so we've broken down, like, okay, what does entrepreneurship 101 mean to you, right? And we've broken down some of those terms, things that often get overlooked. What are like more things that you see people running into at that sort of, and when I say startup, I don't mean like literally making a startup, but just like at their step one.
Yeah.
What are things that you see people often run into outside of like, okay, they might not understand the language. They might not understand kind of those hidden mystery words that are like, wait, hold on, what's a P&L? You know, honestly, if you asked me what a P&L was, I'd be like, I'm not 100% sure. And then when you say profit and loss, I'm like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't give you the actual terminology, right? What are other things that you feel like a lot of people have those blockades of, or the roadblocks with immediately?
I think people often miss how important self-development is in that whole process, in that you are going to be becoming the entrepreneur that you hope to be through the whole process. Much like working out is painful and tears muscles so that it can be rebuilt, the same way, we are exposing ourselves to risk. Inherently, that's like what this whole thing is. We're like saying, I want to do this work and I'm going to take on an extra dose of risk and I'll get an extra dose of reward in the process, or hopefully. And in all of that, you're exposed to more pressure. And so the self-development that happens from a mental standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a self-care standpoint is so important, because you will, an entrepreneur, a creative person, someone who cares about what they're doing, is doing it with intention, and it's sort of an expression of who they are to go and do all this stuff, is gonna probably burn out at some point. And if you burn out, and I mean this, our team's working with a person who helps with burnout specifically. She calls herself a burnout prevention specialist. Fascinating person. I would introduce you, but I need her to help my team more, so I'm not going to mention her name. But it's like a clinical thing. Like when you get physically actually really burn out, not just like, I'm tired today, I'm going to watch Netflix, but like I'm burnt out, your brain can't do the things necessary to be creative or to be thoughtful or to help continue to build things. We like lose our batteries need replaced or recharged or something like that. And so I think that you will change and grow, and your business and your clients, your customers, your team, whatever you're trying to do will kind of you're going to smack up against some things. And I wish when I had started, I had been a little bit more mindful of that, a little bit less like bravado of me being like, I think I've got a really great way of doing things. I think I'm going to change the world, industry, whatever. And now I'm a little bit like, I feel really strongly about this. I might be completely have lost my marbles, or I'm a genius. We won't really know that for a little while. And I think I'm comfortable with that, versus me being like, I'm right, the world is wrong, let me enforce my will on everybody.
Right.
So I say all that to be like, there's just so much I think there's a lot of parallels with entrepreneurship and creative work or art or things like that. There's so much vulnerability. I think that being a human is sort of inherently entrepreneurial in a sense, or we try to do things, we try to make an impact, we try to make a difference, we try to change things. I think there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah. And a lot of it's just like being able to identify, like, you're taking the first step into something, you're going to change and evolve as it goes.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the thing in order to start doing the thing. You need to understand that, like, you're gonna evolve into the thing. And then when you evolve into the thing, there's still more versions of that you've got to become at a different point in time.
Yeah.
Like, you'll figure out how to be the thing at one point in time, and then there's a different version that you're going to need to be at some point. Like, that to me is, I feel like it's kind of the imposter syndrome thing, right? Which is a whole other topic for another 15-minute Friday, right? But like, I think a lot of people do, at least from what I've seen, you prevent yourself from diving into something because you're like, I'm not already the thing. Yeah. Which means I can't do the things I want to do, rather than like a lot of what you've been saying of like understanding that vulnerability, understanding the risk factor of I've got to try this, and I've just got to try it, and it might not work. And I'm not going to understand how I can do it, unfortunately, until you're just doing it. Like, so you never know until you're like taking the leap and all that sort of stuff.
That's the truth.
Things to avoid. I would love to talk, like, we've
only
got a couple minutes left, but I would love to.
Things to avoid, and I'm glad you asked this because I wanted to talk about this, was my next point. Anyway, you're in my head, which is great.
Perfect.
The amount of money that you make will be either more or less than you are worth as a person. And it's more about how you run a bit. So someone being like, I make 6 figures when I have something, or when I make $275 an hour, and then you go to a restaurant and someone's serving you, and that person might seem less than, or might seem something because their hour and your hour are worth a different amount of money. I think that's one thing. The other can be on the flip side, is you can be not making a lot, but building, it's like Uber famously just lost a bunch of money and then went public, right? Like, it just continually lost money. It never made money. And when you start to give yourself that permission to be like, how much can I just afford to lose all of the time? That's fine. It's okay. I think that's something which goes into a bigger point that I think is maybe the most important thing would be, if you can either delay or avoid needing external validation, or someone else to choose you, or someone else to feature you in their write-up for you to think yourself successful, you have removed all of the gatekeepers, and you've removed all of the credentialing. And that's why I chose entrepreneurship, not because I wanted to do something, but because I was like, I kind of just want to do the stuff I want to do. And I worked at some other companies with wonderful humans who managed me and were on my team. And at some point I was like, I can't do what I want to do. I can't fix this the way I want to fix this, or I can't help someone the way I want to help someone. And, or I sat for a year and a half to try to get somebody, and this was like 2010, to let somebody let me start pushing on social media for their brand. And now we wake up 12 years later, and that company is still sort of like a little behind the curve, but could have been very far ahead of the curve. We could have been like first in that industry and for that thing. And I was like, and it was like a year I was there, and I was like, all right, let's do this soon. Sending people articles, doing all these things. And I was like, I can just start doing it myself. Mm-hmm. I'll just do it for me. I'll just do it for my own business, or I'll do it for my own stuff. I'll throw my own parties. I'll do stuff the way I think it should be done. And we'll see if that's brilliant or terrible. But at least I'm not waiting for somebody else to pick me. I'm picking myself.
You're doing the thing and you're figuring it out. You're finding out if it works.
Yeah. I tell people often, I said this today to an artist. We were talking, and I said, the imposter syndrome comes up anytime we're doing something vulnerable, it's imposter syndrome is going to be in our ear telling us some stuff. But in a world where you've picked yourself, if you can make that your world, where you've chosen to do the thing you're going to do, in that world, you hear the phrase, fake it till you make it, right? And if you are making it, if you are doing the thing, you are inherently not faking it. You're only faking it if you're faking it, right? If you're appearing to do something. But if you're actually out there making art, building your thing, trying to build your business, doing your stuff, that is as much entrepreneurship as any person does. That's what it is. You're doing it, and you don't need somebody else to sort of, that validation feels really good when someone notices you and it's like, I see what you're doing. That feels great. But if you can be self-motivated or find your own motivation, then no one can stop you, right? Yeah. You'll be unstoppable.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Dude, we already hit our 15 minutes.
That's great.
We already made it happen. That was so good. Thank you.
That's lovely.
So much. Okay, so before we officially say goodbye, if you were to ball everything up into either a handful of like points of like, these are the takeaways, these are the things I want you to remember, or if there's one main thing that you want to leave somebody with from this episode, what is it?
Just this become our mantra inside of the Gem Club a bit. I can't really figure out who our audience is or what we're trying to talk about. But I like people and I would encourage people to become this type of person, someone who does their own thing in their own way. And you can do that at a place you work. You can do that with your family and friends. Do your own thing in your own way. The world needs a lot of people being themselves. I don't need many more of me. We already got me. Don't need many more of you. We've already got you. We need a whole bunch of other people who are different and doing their own thing in their own way. That's it. That's all I got.
I love it. Any you want anybody to go check anything out anywhere?
You can search the Gem Club. Yeah, so it's a podcast that we have wonderful guests on. You've been a guest on it, and it's a bunch of different, interesting type of folks who are doing things in their own way.